Thanks, Dean. Morning, everybody. Thanks, Russell and Veronica, for the opportunity to be here again this year. I just want to wind the clock back 12 months from the get-go here to last year's conference, and immediately after that went out to dinner with a few people who stayed on for a few hours after the conference, and partway through that dinner, Harriet Palmer leaned across to me and said, "Great presentation, I've got a much clearer idea about what RPBC does." And a few minutes later, Fred Skipper leaned across from the other side of the table and said, "Great presentation, but I still have no idea what RPBC does." So as a representative sample of my presentation feedback, I thought there was still work in progress there. So I thought what I'd just start with very, very quickly today is just open with a few slides, just recapping what it is that the organisation does, because I think that's important for the context that comes in the later slides. Once we've got that out of the way, I just want to talk about some of a range of achievements for the last 12 months since we last met in this forum, then move on to the year ahead, current financial year, and then just talk about a broader range of challenges that are facing the organisation and in some cases the sector. So what do we do? How do I make this move? Okay, underway. So in terms of what we do, the best way to think about the company is, in its most stripped back form, is its three primary functions: the management of the breeding orchard at Purchase Road, trial management, field trial management, and undertaking research. So Purchase Road, located in North Canterbury, it's a 6-hectare breeding orchard. There's 6,000 individuals sitting in that orchard, and about 1,500 unique individuals. And you could loosely regard that as the engine room of the organisation, I think. Inherent in this slide is basically all the work that we do around characterising and describing germplasm and getting it out to market. From the orchard, we generate new material each year, which is put out to test trials in New Zealand and Australia. These are our forest locations that we're trialling material currently in New Zealand. We're well spread through the North Island, as you'd expect, and a heavy preponderance of trials located in the central North Island. In part, that's a legacy issue. In part, that reflects just the scale of the sector in that area. We're represented at the top and bottom of the South Island also. And we're in New South Wales and Tasmania. Why are we in New South Wales and Tasmania? Basically because 25% of the shareholding area is domiciled in Australia. So we are very much a trans-Tasman organisation. Okay. The third thing that we do is undertake research, and we do a little bit of this off our own back. In-house, but by far the bulk of this is done in partnership with other organisations. So those are the key organisations that we're partnering with in the current financial year. And the 80-20 rule absolutely kicks in here for us to scale those logos by investment, by spend. Sion would take up 2/3 of that slide. Okay, so they're a heavy hitter for us. They're a heavy hitting partner in terms of getting work done and delivering on our programs. So all of that comes together in what we loosely call a very simplified breeding supply chain. Over to the left-hand side, you have research funding, looking for providers and delivering outputs, essentially into the breeding population. Centre of that supply chain. Over to the right, you've got the bulking up of germplasm production out to nurseries and out to forest. Okay, so left-hand end is basically all about R&D and trialling and testing. Out the right-hand end is all about deployment and doing. Okay. I can't really break it down to anything more simple than that. I think if you still have some confusion about what it is that we do, Fred, you should come and visit us in the University of Canterbury. Come out to the breeding orchard, spend a bit of time with one of the local seed producers and get a closer look. We'd be really happy to host anyone who's inclined. Okay, so I want to talk about some of the achievements now from the last 12 months. This is far from an exhaustive list. Instead, I've actually tended to opt for breadth of material. So you're going to get a look at a range of not just technical matters, but also some commercial and organisational achievements, because I think they're important as well. The first thing that we did, got squared away this year, was reviewing the breeding objective for the company. And the traits that we measure in our trials are weighted in order to maximise our response to selection or gain in the breeding objective in a net present value sense. Why is this important? Well, it's important because actually we hadn't been back and had a look at this objective for about 10 years. And it's not that we want to be reviewing it every year, but we've essentially managed to move from what used to be a reasonably informal and opaque, I guess, approach to reviewing the objective to a much more robust, documented, formal and transparent approach. So that certainly within the organisation, everybody's very, very clear about what we're selecting and breeding for and chasing it at rotation age. Snip Chip number 1 is here. Veronica, sorry, I left a little box sitting on the desk. Could you grab that for me, please? Snip Chip number 1 is here. This is after 5 years and $5 million worth of investment. We've basically now got the world's first commercially developed snip chip for Radiata pine. Thank you. Thank you. And it's not quite as big as it looks like on the screen. It's actually this big. That's the thick end of $5 million worth of investment and 5 years. And it's been a long time coming. From our perspective, what do we use it for? How does it help us? I'm going to talk about that in a later slide. But I think what I do want to recognise at this stage is the fact that getting to this result at the end of this time is really a credit to the people who conceived the program, and I would acknowledge my predecessor, John Butcher, as being instrumental in that regard. It's a credit to the people who believed enough to fund the work. MB were there, absolutely stumped up with 2.5 million, and the balance of that came solely from the shareholding members of the organisation at that stage. So there was no royalty monies in the development of the snip chip. What we really want to be able to do, of course, in time is predict phenotype from genotype before we even get into a field test. And for that reason, we're basically busy now sampling thousands and thousands of trees in New Zealand and in Australia to pin down the genetic blueprint. So I think we picked up about 12,500 samples or trees last summer, and we're about to embark again in the period from November to April on about another 10,500 trees. Okay. We've relaxed our controls around intellectual property, specifically access to data for research purposes, access to elite germplasm for research purposes. Much easier to do that now than it had been in the past. Market access to breeding values. If you saw the release of the website last week, the company has now released its underlying breeding values to the broader marketplace. Why would we do that? I suppose is a question that I sometimes still get asked, and ultimately it's about freedom to operate, freedom to run, and allowing the program to run more quickly. And we see that absolutely in the end delivering genetic gain faster to the marketplace. There's no point holding this stuff so close that even key key partners to our program, and Scion's a good example. We'd really hamstrung their ability to access our raw data sets and to access elite germplasm for trials. No more. We signed a collaboration agreement with Scion, so this really flowed directly on from the preceding slide. I can't really tell you what's in the detail of that agreement, but you can see the header, you can see the signatories at the end. Is Julian still in the room? Yeah, are you happy? Okay, good. So am I. Yeah, so thank you for the effort that you put in personally to get this over the line. This agreement, this framework to operate, puts to bed probably the thick end of 15 to 20 years of a reasonably untidy relationship between the two organisations, and I shudder to think about the opportunity cost of, genetic gain-wise that's been lost along the way. But what we really have now is a framework to operate and get on and do the things that we're both good at. A lot of people in this room publish material to the market far more often than we do. So I've got to be careful being too positive about getting two publications out to everybody. But the reality is, for context, we put 5 of these out in the period 2000 to 2009, nothing from 2010 to 2018. All right, so we operated in a vacuum with our market for the thick end of 10 years. So to get 2 out this year and finding people to write these things is jolly difficult. There's no H-score, for anyone who knows what H-score in delivering one of these. There's no real brownie points for the people that we need to write this sort of stuff. So it's difficult to get people enthusiastic about this stuff, but it's just vital for us. So our pledge basically is to connect with the market in this way every year going forward. We've had approval from the board to provide a breeding pathway for attenuata radiata hybrids. This will be good news for the small coalition of the willing, and hopefully for Scion too, who are invested in this space and a range of other conifers. We just really want to make the radiata breeding population and the pathway open to get this material to market faster than currently happens. And this is really all about expanding radiata's geographic and environmental range as we sort of stare down the barrel of things like drier climates in the future. We've added a third full-time staff member to the RPBC, and just about everything we do occurs in units of 1s and 2s, you'll be noticing. So Ben's our third person on the ground. Again, why is that a big deal? It's a big deal because 15 months ago we were a 1-person organisation. For most of the last year we've been a 2-person organisation. We're now a 3-person organisation. When we're probably about where we need to be now. We've never had 3 full-time management staff working for the organisation on a salary basis, and it just sheets straight home to our capacity to get things done, to service internally the organisation and its shareholding, and then to get out and look around and do things in the broader marketplace that are important to us. Finally, a new website. If you picked up offcuts last week, you would have seen the link to www.rpbc.co.nz. In there, it's our first internet presence, I think, in about 36 months, so we're pleased to be back and re-engaged in 2019 in a way that most other people have been for a long time. But we've taken quite a different approach to our previous websites. We've been a lot more open about the material that's on there. We've tried to cater for a broader audience, not just for... we've really tried to get the technical messages distilled down to essence where we can in layperson's language. And that's not always easy in the breeding and genetics space. Not always easy at all. There's a range of educational and training materials on there as well, so I'd encourage you to go and have a look when you get a chance. So in terms of goals for the coming year, I really just want to touch on a handful. Again, there's a mixed bag. That's not all we're doing by any stretch of the imagination, but I think they're amongst the most important things that will tick off this year. We're going to undertake the largest trial measurement program in the company's history. Why does that matter? It matters because in our phenotype database at the moment, the analysis is predicated on about 500,000 records. And in the period from 1 April this year through to 30 June next year, we'll add about another 100,000 records to that database as we catch up on a whole range of legacy measurements. So around 20% increase in the size of the data set. That's a big deal. Safe havens for data is right in the crosshairs. So that 500,000 records, simple analogy for you, takes up, if it's the size of a pocket handkerchief, the equivalent underlying genotypic description takes up the size of a football field that handkerchief is sitting on, right? So we have a lot of data coming our way from the genotype data that we're collecting in the field. 5. We want to complete the breeding analysis multiple times in a single year, something that we haven't done before. We need to check our parentage, and that's really the first thing that we'll do with this thing. It's making sure that the mums and dads are who we think they are. Why is that important? Typically in the sheep industry, you will find, they've historically found around 8% of their material is discrepant or in error when they've first run their material through a snip chip. And dairy cows, that sheets right out to around 25% in error. Where are we going to sit? We don't know yet. We'll have our first indications of that by Christmas. The other thing that we'll be doing for the first time this year is incorporating genomic information into the breeding value estimation for the first time. That's something that Mark Padgett, our breeder, and the Scion team, and Luis Apulazza from UOC are turning their mind to now. So these things are all about, for us, all about speed and accuracy. So we have some challenges ahead beyond that 12-month time frame. We've really going to get stuck into the breeding orchards at Purchase Road. 25% of that material is going to be rogued out in the next 18 months and then progressively repopulated with the elite material that's coming through from our trial selections. Really important, right? So again, go back to the analogy of the engine room. The engine needs basically reservicing, not just a tune-up, but it needs a complete reservice. So it's getting a really substantive overhaul. The transition to genomic breeding values, phenotype or genotype, really this is, and I haven't got time to go into the detail of this here, but this is all about your appetite for risk. And this is not just an issue facing the RPBC, it's an issue that's facing the germplasm producers, and it's also an issue that's facing the growers out in the sector. The traditional breeding deployment pathways are going to be challenged. There's work underway in both somatics and tissue culture now. That tissue culture work in particular is very disruptive. I've said that we like that, and personally I do like that. I think it's really, really important to get stuck into some of these sacred cows that exist in this space. Reliable tools for assessing at the tree level. We battle with the same things that most growers battle with, but with a slightly different slant. The photograph on the left there is one of the two acoustic tools that exist for that we use for collecting PME data in our estate. Both this tool, which was developed at UOC, and the ST300 developed by Fibergen are basically not available to us on a commercial basis now. We can't just go and buy them off the shelf, and we'd very much like to, because they're a core part of our program. On the other side, at a sort of more macro level, we don't collect height data in our trials at the moment. That might be a surprise to some people. And the reason we don't do it is we're not assessing at the stand level or the stratum level. Our trials are individual tree plot trials, and we have to assess at the tree plot level. So we need technology that is accurate at the tree level. So we're really interested in what the work that Dave Pont and the team are doing in this, Toby and the team are doing in this space. Transtasman germplasm importation, why is that important? because sitting in Australia are several breeding populations that have some great material in them. We would like some of that material infused into our population and vice versa. Our problem at the moment are just the borders on each side of the Tasman don't make that easy. And I could talk for hours about that, and I won't. Genomics developments, this area is moving quickly, and one thing about getting genomics squared away over the last few years is that we've now got a framework for adapting the new technologies. But a word of caution, we do that really against a backdrop of a species that throws up really interesting challenges in terms of time to proof concept. So we're not really good at just accepting that a technology that works in another sector can be absolutely deployed without question in our own sector. I think that's fair comment, but going through that proof of concept phase takes time. And we've got a lot of conservative people obviously sitting in the breeding supply chain. We've got the molecular biologists sitting at one end, everything good comes out of a test tube, and at the other end we've got the conventional breeders where nothing good comes out of the test tube. And the reality is that there is a blend of that is going to work for us. We've been really fortunate to work with a group of people at Scion who anchor both ends of that spectrum in many ways, but happy to, just lost my screen. Anyway, happy to acknowledge the views of others. I want to talk now about my final two slides, Mr. Timekeeper, about a couple of commercial and organisational challenges. And I think as a CE, I just find it hard not to talk about these sorts of things if they're influencing the technical material, the core material that you're trying to deal with. So I accept this as a technical forum, but if you just indulge me for these couple of slides, please. I feel quite passionate about both of them, so I'm probably not going to stray too far from my script in case I say something that I regret later. But from a CE's perspective, secure funding streams are really the core ingredient of our commercial licence to operate. And 2 years ago, RPBC was in a really dire position financially, and the board took a position to underwrite its own programs with increases to shareholder payments and the royalty contributions. And that strategy has been very, very successful, and it speaks to phrases like risk mitigation, going concern, and directors and officers liability. Okay, so those are things that in a limited liability organisation you're always thinking about when you're sailing close to the wind. At the same time, we were engaging with Wellington for ongoing access to public monies to support the future program. As successful as the previous strategy was, this strategy was completely unsuccessful. And really since then, it's been a long time since I've been back into the public funding space, probably since 1999. Since then, in the last couple of years, I've really watched brigades of researchers either embraced or swept aside in the Great Wellington dash for cash, as I sort of call it. Why does that matter? Aside from the impact on people personally, I do worry about the eventual impact of that model on those who take up research. They're inherently a conservative group of individuals anyway, and partly that's a reflection from the fact that if you get it wrong in our sector, you're a long time driving past your own mistakes in a forest. It's just the reality of it. So we're very, very conservative beasts. But the idea of repackaging research of interest to suit the flavour of a funding application, diluting the message from the outset and then presenting research of interest in a way that's less recognisable to users at the end, I personally just find that really odd. So I think with 3 or 4 weeks to go, I'm probably okay to say something like that. My final slide is about diversity. So in January of this year, the RPBC commenced a discussion about what the board might look like in 2 or 3 years' time, and within a few months, we secured the services of our second only female director and our first ever truly independent director from outside the sector, and her name's Bridget MacArthur, and she's been a godsend from my point of view, a fantastic contributor to governance at RPBC. And I should say, and I'm always mindful when touching on the issue of gender balance in forestry, of a comment that was made to me by a researcher colleague earlier in the year. She said she loves going to forestry conferences because you don't have to queue for the loos. And I mean, it is funny, but it's also a little bit sad in its own way. So the problem that the RPBC now faces is that the balance of our serving officers in the business, which is six non-exec directors and the chief executive, myself, we're all pretty much cut from the same cloth. Middle-aged men with technical and operations forestry backgrounds, and the challenge to throw up creative and disruptive thinking, I think it becomes really difficult when you've got so many people who are essentially the same. And I think in that regard, RPBC is really just a microcosm of the rest of the sector. The keys to those same sorts of decisions around change and expansive thinking tend to be held by the same people right across the sector, and we convince ourselves that that's really important for reasons like continuity and the retention of institutional knowledge. But ultimately, I think it's actually leading to thinking that's somewhat stale and vanilla. Personal view, not an RPBC view. So there's a plethora of wonderful and experienced intellectual talent that exists both within the sector, but more importantly outside the sector, that can't get a seat at the key tables in RPBC at the moment or in our broader industry committees and organisations, because the constitutions and charters simply don't allow it, and I really think it's time to redress that. So my final slide, are we in good shape? Yes, I think we are. We're stable, we're cohesive, we've got clear direction and we've got momentum. We're probably better connected to our peer organisations than we have been in a long, long time. And bearing in mind that supply chains are really only as strong as their weakest link, we've been that link before and we are not that link now. And I think if I had to select three words to really sum the organisation up in terms of where it's at right now, speed, accuracy, transparency would be the watchwords. And I personally look forward to the changes that the momentum that we've driven into the organisation in the last 24 months deliver for not just for the company but for the sector as a whole over the next 10 years or so. Thanks for your time. Cool.
I have to say it, but he stayed on a bit longer than his allotted time, but he's very passionate about his topic, so we give him that liberty. Our next speaker is a joint presentation on accelerating deployment of improved genetics for tissue culture and nursery automation, which is essentially around, just in my own words, getting more genetic gain to the forest more quickly. And for that presentation, we've got Associate Professor Jana Krasnikova, Research Leader at Scion, and also Craig Ford, who's a propagation scientist with Scion. So I'd like to welcome them to come forward and give us their presentation. Cheers.